Ahoy Malloy Fantasy Football Fanatics. Welcome back to ACME Real Fantasy Football Podcast. We're coming at you with a packed show today as Week 6 delivered some heart-pounding action. In our game of the week, TDs pulled off a stunning 33-31 victory over Ballbusters, with Chris Godwin sealing the win with 2 clutch touchdowns. We'll dive deep into that thriller in a bit. But that's not all. This episode also breaks down the rookies' Illuminati big win, Rump Rangers' close victory, and Derrick Henry's leading the tough mofos to another sweep. Across the board, Week 6 shook things up. The average team moved up 2 places in the rankings, making this one of the most competitive weeks yet. Plus, we're gearing up for a huge Week 7. Not only is it the positioning rounds, but we have the undefeated Chiefs clashing against the 49ers, the Saints taking on the Broncos, so buckle up, it's gonna be an exciting ride. But before we dive into the action, let's quickly go over how the ACME Real Fantasy Football scoring works. It's all about making every play count, from touchdowns to defensive stops. This season, the scoring is focused on rewarding players who shine in the clutch. Make sure to keep an eye on your key players because every point matters. Let's kick things off by diving into the first round of Week 6 scores, and folks, we've got some tight matchups to break down. First up, Illuminati pulled off a victory over Joe Buck Yourself with a final score of 28-23. The key player here was tight end Cole Kmet, who chipped in 4.1 fantasy points to seal the win for the rookie team. Next, Rump Ranger edged out T-Money 29-26. The star of this game, running back Najee Harris, who contributed 4.7 points to help the Rump Rangers secure the win. Then, we had Lickety Splitters roaring past Bod Squad with a 30-27 victory. The Lions defense was dominating, racking up 10 points, while Debo Samuel Jr. added 5.6 points at wide receiver. When your defense and wide receiver are pulling weight like that, it's hard to lose. Todd's tough mofos crushed bodily harm in a 31-21 win, and it was Derrick Henry who made the biggest splash with 2 rushing touchdowns, netting 5.1 fantasy points. The king is back, and he's leading his squad to victory. Finally, let's give a quick shout out to the Killers who OJ'd the Sock Monkeys with a 30-25 victory. Joe Mixon showed he could mix it up with 5.5 fantasy points, making sure the Killers secured the W. This episode of ACME Real Fantasy Football Podcast is brought to you by, well, us of course. ACME Real Fantasy Football, where the thrill of the game is just one click away. Sign up today at acmerealfantasyfootball.com. And now, it's time to talk about our game of the week. This was a true nail-biter, with TDs pulling off a dramatic win over Ballbusters 33-31. How did it happen? This game was so close that only an act of God could save them. Well, in this case, it was none other than Chris Godwin who saved the team with a jaw-dropping performance. Godwin posted 2 receiving touchdowns, totaling 125 receiving yards for a crucial 6.1 fantasy points. When the pressure was on, Godwin delivered, giving TDs a victory by the narrowest of margins. And that's how the TDs pulled off that thriller, 33-31 over Ballbusters. This nail-biter has big implications for the standings. And speaking of standings, let's check in on the overall records for some of our top teams. Right now, Killers and Rump Rangers are leading the pack with the 47-19 overall, followed closely by Todd's Tough Mofos and Ballbusters at 44-22, and TDs and Lickety Splitters rounding things out with a 36-30. Pay close attention to the TDs because they've been slowly making their way up the top since week 2. Every point counts as we're heading into our positioning round next week, so keep an eye on these teams as they fight to keep alive their playoff hopes. Now, let's turn things ahead and look towards Week 7 because there are some must-watch matchups coming your way, starting with Thursday Night Football. It's the New Orleans Saints facing off against the Denver Broncos. On Sunday, we've got an international battle, so set your alarms as the Jacksonville Jaguars face off against the New England Patriots at Wembley Stadium in London. And back stateside, the Buffalo Bills host the Tennessee Titans at Highmark Stadium. Get ready for a Bills Mafia stampede. In the Sunday afternoon matchups, the Minnesota Vikings take on the Detroit Lions at US Bank Stadium, while over at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, it's the Atlanta Falcons squaring off against the Seattle Seahawks. Meanwhile, we've got some other exciting matchups. Cincinnati Bengals versus versus Cleveland Browns, Houston Texans versus Green Bay Packers, Miami Dolphins versus Indianapolis Colts, Philadelphia Eagles faces the New York Giants, and you know Philly fans will be tuned in for this one. Raiders versus the Rams, Panthers versus the Commanders, and how about those undefeated Kansas City Chiefs going up against the San Francisco 49ers? Can the 49ers hand them their first L? Stay tuned to find out. Finally, we're closing out week 7 with 2 Monday Night Football matchups. The Baltimore Ravens take on Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we got a little West Coast showdown as the Los Angeles Chargers face off against the Arizona Cardinals. Mark your calendars, week 7 is going to be wild, and if you thought things were intense already, the positioning round is about to crank things up a notch. Next week, we'll see how our teams are jockeying for playoff spots and why every single point matters more than ever, as next week marks the start of the positioning round, where every matchup has playoff implications. The schedule is really starting to peel back another layer of competition as teams in the middle of the pack are scrambling to secure their spots. But while our league is neck and neck, it's worth mentioning that other leagues aren't so lucky. We've been hearing some rumblings and stories from other fantasy leagues where, 1 or 2 teams are running away with the competition, leaving everyone else playing for second place. But that's not happening here in ACME. The competition is fierce and the standings are still wide open for anyone to make a move. Keep your rosters locked in, folks. Anything can happen in these prime matchups as we roll into week 7. And that's a wrap for this week's ACME Real Fantasy Football Podcast. Don't forget, Fantasy Glory is just yards away and is waiting for you at ACME. We'll be back next week with more scores, more highlights, and more action. Until then, good luck setting your lineups and may the best team win.